It's Marsh. So I'm just doing like my housework, so I'm having to wash stuff by hand, and I'm just at the whole rinsing it off in the sink part, doing the clothing because our water still hasn't been fixed. We're closer to getting it fixed, but it hasn't been fixed. And I was just like, you know how your mind wanders when you're doing some like meaningless task, right? So I was thinking about years ago when I got probably my second apartment, and times were tough and things like that. And I was thinking about like all the stuff I went through when I got my first place, when I got my second place. Like we've had disaster after disaster with social housing. It's just kind of how it is. The housing associations try, but they've got so many properties that are, needing repairing or whatnot. So I'm not blaming the housing association or anything. But it just got me thinking to like when I first came out. So this would have been in the height of the It Gets Better movement. My system, we decided, that we were going to start looking into transitioning, and we wanted to figure out what, we as a whole thought our sexuality was and stuff like that. And like, I was just thinking, if that It Gets Better movement hadn't happened, then I don't think we would be where we are today in a lot of ways, not just with our system, but I don't think we'd have been strong enough to actually get through quite a lot of the stuff that we went through. And I was just thinking back to even just a few years ago. It was COVID, and I'd been laid off work because I was among one of the first people to get COVID in England, because it was rampant in London, which is where we were working at the time. And like most of my workforce came down with it, and all the construction sites were just rife with COVID-19. This was before it was even called COVID-19. I think back then it was just a coronavirus, unspecified. So we were like ground zero in England, and we lost our job, and we were at home, and we were sick, and we had long COVID. So it went on and on and on, and it just felt like we were never going to get better. And then, sadly, my mum died, just out of the blue. She didn't have COVID or anything, but, she passed away. And this was in the height of when things were, like, really bad for our system. We were having up to 80 flashbacks a day, but we were in really deep trauma therapy at the time, trying to just survive. And my house, it had, the place we were living at the time, it had really bad water problem. Like the water table underneath the house had just stopped working. So like water's supposed to be taken away under the foundation, right? And it wasn't. It was coming back up through into the floor. So we lost all our carpets and lots of stuff that we'd spent money on and trying to get our place looking nice. It all got ruined. And I was thinking like, it does get better, because yes, that was like probably one of the worst times of our life, was like trying to get through that, trying to sort out my mum's house, because it was all left on us. Like nobody could go anywhere, nobody could do anything. We were the only people in the same town as her, so it was all on us. So we were dealing with that. We were dealing with trying to homeschool, which wasn't going well. And yeah, everything just, it got to a point. And I think it got to like, we've had a few dark points in our life, but I think it had got to a point where actually we were thinking, I can't go on. We were grieving, we were dealing with a lot of stuff that going through the house, like this was our childhood house, had brought up. And it was like so many memories and so many corroboration of the, abuse, of the trauma. My elder brother was helping, and he was corroborating a lot of the stuff, and he was going through quite a lot of the same stuff we were going through, and we were dealing with that, and we were trying to deal with the flashbacks we were already having, and the really bad CPTSD symptoms we were already struggling with before my mum's passing. And it just got to this real low point. And I just remember being so depressed and grieving so hard and just thinking there isn't ever going to be a way that life could get better. But it did. And looking back to that now, I wish I could go back and tell my system or tell us, it gets better. It is going to get better. And that's happened a few times in our life. So obviously, back in that very first apartment, we had problems, and, we'd moved to the second apartment, which is when, the It Gets Better movement was around, and celebrities were suddenly singing about, coming out and being gay, and people were starting to talk about mental health and all this important stuff that had never been a conversation when I was growing up. It just wasn't a conversation. If you mentioned you had a problem, you were labeled something, and it wasn't something good. So this, it helped. It got me through. And around the time 2020, there was a lot of celebrities doing similar things. They were talking about mental health. They were showing about mental health. You had songs coming out that were talking about everybody struggling with the lockdowns. Everybody, you need to survive. You need to get through this. Everybody's a unit. The Queen and people like that were coming out with speeches saying, everybody is united. Everybody's family. And I guess if we hadn't had that, if we hadn't have still had, the It Gets Better music to play when we're struggling. And it doesn't have to be about coming out as being gay. It can just be for anything. Life does get better. And that's the thing. If we'd have given up on those times, then we'd have missed out on so much. And I guess what I'm thinking about at the moment is all those people out there who don't believe that it's going to get better, or don't believe that people care about them. And I've been there. We've been there a lot since we were like 2 years old. Just trauma after trauma, and authority figure after authority figure who didn't care and didn't listen and didn't help, despite asking or begging or pleading for it. Like, we didn't believe it would ever get better. We didn't believe that we would get to a point where, we could wake up every day and say, do you know what, I'm glad I'm alive. And I think to get to that point is amazing. To be sober is amazing. Like, I was answering questions for some medical thing the other day, and they were like, when did you start smoking? When did you start drinking? And if you look at it from them not knowing the past or the history, or, the child abuse and the traumas and the stuff that we went through, it looks horrific to put on there, okay, I was 7 when I first became an alcoholic, and it looks seriously bad if you say I started doing drugs at the age of 10. And it's not a, we were in poverty thing. We didn't grow up in poverty. We didn't grow up rich, but we didn't grow up in poverty. So it's not like, it's a certain class of people, or it's a certain statistic. It's just not how it is. People who turn to drugs and people who turn to alcohol, they're usually abused. It's the same with the homeless, right? It's usually abused people. And I know everyone can look at me and go, hey, white privilege. Yes, I'm not just talking about white people here. I'm talking about across the board. Any color, any creed, any place, you have these issues where there's, poverty, neglect, abuse. And it causes people to, especially if they can't access the help or get help, or if nobody is listening to them, they end up, on drugs, or turning to crime, or, prostitution, or whatever. There is such a broad range of things that you do to survive. And for me, I didn't have people like going, oh, hey, I'm here for you, or I'm going to help you. It wasn't a thing. We had to help ourselves for, 30 odd years. But the only help we did get was from songs and people coming out saying, hey, it's going to get better, or we're all a family. That matters. And I was just thinking back to, I must have been maybe 22, something like that, 23. So we're talking, 15 years ago, something like that. And I remember we had this big group of people on Facebook. This was one of our original Facebook pages, which, we lost over time. And I remember that there was this one girl on there, this woman, and we used to follow her posts, and, we used to interact, and we had like this big group of friends on there who weren't really friends in the real world, but we'd interact because, you know, we'd all been on a group and we'd all kind of like migrated from that to Facebook friends. And I remember finding out it was around New Year, and she hadn't posted for like a week, you know. We used to follow her, and we used to like seeing her posts or whatever used to cheer us up, because we'd be like, oh, you know, this girl gets it. And we found out that she'd actually taken her life, and that hit us really hard, because we'd never told this person that, you know, we used to watch their stuff every day or read their stuff and interact, and, you know, it actually gave something to our life when we were, you know, perhaps struggling with real life friendships and dealing with stuff. And like I said, this was around the time the Trevor Project and the It Gets Better stuff was all around. And she didn't get any help. She didn't have people helping her. And, you know, a lot of her actual real friends and, you know, in the real world, and her online friends missed her. Like, and I still think about her to this day, like, how sad it is that she's not around. Which got me thinking of all the times that I've thought to myself, I don't want to be around, or I don't have anyone. You know, you lose friends over the years. The older you get, you know, people, they move or they disappear, and it becomes harder to see them. Life takes over, you know, they have kids, or they have relationship breakdowns, move on to a new relationship, and they get a whole new circle of friends. Stuff happens, you know. And I was just thinking, like, I've had people in my darkest time message or comment to certain things I've posted on Instagram or Facebook back in the day and stuff like that, and they say, you know, I'm here, I know I don't interact with you, but you posting every day, it's interesting, I look forward to it, you know, when I see you on my feed, it gives me that little boost. And I never believed that in my darkest time. I didn't. But thinking back to that girl who, you know, took her life, it was the exact same thing. She gave something to my life and to other people's lives. So I think, like, even if you're not being told, even if, you know, you think you're alone, you genuinely are not. I mean, I don't have a lot of friends. I don't have a lot of people interacting with me. But that doesn't mean that people aren't interacting with what I post, or interacting with a song recommendation, or a stupid movie recommendation, or whatever else it is that we post online. There is somebody reading it. And it's not just, you know, your friends, your family. There might be some random stranger out there who is struggling, how we were struggling back then, who sees that little tiny thing, no matter how silly, even if it's just a picture of a flower, or a post about your dog, or I dropped my tea this morning and now I'm having a breakdown. That stuff does matter to people. Like, you don't need a giant following. You don't need to be this great big social media thing to touch somebody's life. You know, if even in the real world, if you're just walking down the street and, I don't know, you say hi to some little old lady who just happened to pass by you and she looked in your eyes, so you said hello, that could be everything to that woman. And I don't think I really realized that until I started healing, and until actually my life got better. And I wish I'd realized it back when things were really bad. And I wish I'd believed it back when things were really bad. But I just kind of wanted to, you know, come on and say, like, I'm actually really grateful to those people who reached out and said in my darkest times, I'm here, or I'm listening, or liked a post, you know? It matters. So like those posts, you know, that seem a little off or a little out there, or somebody's struggling. You don't have to do a lot. Just click the like button. You know, one like on the darkest day could really matter. And yeah, I just want to say to everybody out there who does struggle and who is struggling all the time, that it does get better. And it doesn't seem like it in the darkest times. It doesn't seem like it in the not so dark times. But once it gets better, you'll just be glad that you actually stuck around and saw those days pass and get better. You've got to go through a lot of the dark stuff, and you've got to go through the hard stuff, and you've got to struggle and scream and cry and do the therapy, or not do the therapy, whatever works for you, but just stay alive. it's important, and it's not important just for you or your friends and your family and all that stuff that they just, or at least I found, professionals will say to you, oh, but think, you've got a this, you've got a that, you've got kids, family, friends, mothers, fathers, whatever it is that they're guilt tripping you with. It's not important just for them, it's important for you too. So, for anyone who needs to hear it, it does get better.